Hi and welcome. I'm Midnight Truth, and it's so nice to have you here tonight. Wherever you are right now, whether you're in bed, lie on the couch, or just looking for a quiet moment, I want you to know this time is for you. Take a deep breath in, and as you breathe out, feel the weight of the day start to fade. Let your mind settle. Let your body relax, and let yourself simply be. There's no rush, no pressure, just this calm, quiet moment. If you like, you can close your eyes and imagine yourself in a peaceful place. Maybe it's a cozy room with soft, warm lighting. Or maybe it's under a starry sky, with a gentle breeze brushing against you. Wherever you feel safe and calm, let yourself drift there. I know many of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time is it there? Tonight's story is gentle and soothing, perfect to carry you into a deep, restful sleep. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin. I'd always thought of myself as someone who could handle change, but nothing prepared me for the feeling of walking into this house. It wasn't anything spectacular, nothing grand or breathtaking. It was a simple old two-bedroom house on the edge of town, tucked away behind a line of oak trees. The rent was cheap, and after the divorce, I wasn't in a position to be picky. It was just me now, no kids, no partner, just my things and my quiet existence. The first thing that hit me when I stepped through the door was the smell. It wasn't unbearable, just odd. A mixture of dust, old wood, and something that felt slightly damp. I made my way through the house. Taking it in, the floors creaked beneath my feet, as expected for a house this old. The wallpaper in the hallway was peeling in places, but the space had character. There was something comforting about it. Despite its age, it felt like it had been forgotten, waiting for someone to come and breathe life back into it. I spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking, setting up the furniture, and trying to make the place feel like home. It wasn't much, but it was mine. When evening came, I stood at the window, watching the sun dip behind the trees. It was peaceful, quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that seemed almost unnatural. Later that night, as I was lying in bed, I heard the first sound, a thud. It was faint, almost like a distant door closing. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was just the house settling. After all, old houses do that, don't they? I tried to ignore it, but as the night stretched on, I heard it again, this time louder. A creak followed by a soft thud, as though someone was walking around upstairs. I rolled over and glanced at the ceiling, listening carefully. Nothing, just the silence of the night. The next morning, I met the neighbor. Her name was Mrs. Carver, and she was a thin woman in her late 60s with silver hair tied into a tight bun. She seemed kind, though a little reserved, as if she was sizing me up. We talked for a few minutes, about the weather, about the neighborhood. Then she mentioned the house. "You know," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "this house has had its share of strange tenants over the years." She glanced at the front door, as if the house itself might be listening. Last people who lived here, well, they didn't last long. The man, he ran out one night, screaming about something he saw. Said he'd heard footsteps, voices, didn't even pack up his stuff, left everything behind. I laughed nervously. I'm sure he was just hearing things, old houses and all. She nodded, but her eyes didn't leave the door. Maybe, but there's something about this place. I wouldn't stay here if I were you. People around here, they don't talk about it much, but they remember. Those old stories, they stay with you. I didn't know what to make of it. People tell all sorts of stories about old houses. I assumed it was just one of those things that gets passed down, exaggerated over time. But as I walked back to the house, something about her words stuck with me. And as the evening approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The creaks of the floorboards returned that night, along with the soft thud of footsteps overhead. It wasn't a house settling this time. This was different. My heart began to race as I sat up in bed, listening. There was again, louder now, heavy, deliberate steps pacing across the floor above me. I got out of bed and stood in the middle of the room, holding my breath, hoping it would stop. But it didn't. The footsteps continued, moving from one side of the house to the other. Slowly, Methodically, I reached my phone on the nightstand, but before I could pick it up, the noise stopped. A sudden silence fell over the house. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and clear. I waited, but nothing came. The silence was suffocating, almost as if the house was holding its breath, waiting for something. It was then that I realized I couldn't stay here. But where else would I go? I had nowhere else. So I lay back down, trying to convince myself it was nothing, just the house settling. But deep down, I knew it was something more. I just didn't know it yet. Chapter 2, Whispers in the Dark. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house seemed to have a life of its own, breathing around me, creaking and groaning in the dark. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something to happen. But as the hours passed, I began to wonder if it was all in my head. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again. This time it was a whisper, soft, faint, like someone was speaking just outside my door. I held my breath, straining to hear. The words were too quiet to make out, but the voice sounded wrong. It wasn't human. Not quite. I got out of bed, my feet touching the cold wooden floor. The whispering stopped as soon as I stood up, and I felt a chill creep up my spine. My mind raced, but I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe that something was in the house with me. I made my way to the door and opened it slowly, trying not to make a sound. The hallway was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the moon through the window. I peered down the hallway, but there was no one there. The silence was almost deafening. But then, as I stood there, a cold gust of air rushed past me, making me shiver. It came from the staircase. I hesitated for a moment before making my way toward the stairs. Each step felt like it echoed through the house, as if the floorboards were betraying my every movement. When I reached the top of the stairs, I froze. There, in the middle of the hallway, was a figure, a shadow. It was tall, hunched, and seemed to sway slightly, as if it were trying to maintain balance. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at it. It didn't move, didn't speak. It just stood there, watching me. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't move. I felt like I was frozen in place, trapped in the house with whatever that thing was. And then, as if sensing my fear, the shadow started to move. It was a few days before I started noticing the sounds. At first, I figured it was the usual creaks of an old house settling. Nothing to be concerned about. But as the days passed, I began to feel the weight of the silence that followed me everywhere I went. I'd always been fond of older houses, their history, the character of each room. The walls had stories to tell, I thought. But as I moved through the house, I started to wonder what kind of stories these walls were hiding. The house had a distinct smell, old wood, mildew, dust. I could never seem to air it out, no matter how many candles I burned or how many windows I opened. There was also an odd odor that would appear late at night, like something I couldn't quite place, a musty, sweet scent that always left me uneasy. It wasn't overpowering, but just enough to make me wonder if it was something unnatural. I tried to get used to it, adjusting my routines to match the house's quirks. I'd go to work every day, returning in the evening, always with a sense of dread gnawing at me as I walked up the front steps. I'd never been one to believe in ghosts or curses, but there was something about this place that made it hard to shake that nagging feeling at the back of my mind. One afternoon, I took a walk around the neighborhood to clear my head. Mrs. Carver, my elderly neighbor, was sitting on her porch as usual. She waved at me when she saw me walking by. "New place treating you well?" she asked, her voice raspy but warm. She had been friendly enough since I moved in, though I couldn't say I'd gotten to know her very well. I'd only just moved to town after my divorce, hoping to find some peace in a quiet neighborhood. "It's fine," I said, offering a smile. "Just getting used to the old house, you know?" Mrs. Carver's eyes twinkled as if she knew more than she was letting on. "Old houses can be tricky," she said slowly, her gaze drifting toward the dark windows of my new home. "They tend to hold on to memories, and some of those memories aren't so nice." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" She gave a little shrug, rocking back in her chair. "Oh, nothing really. Just be careful. This house has seen a lot of people come and go. Some of them didn't leave the way they came." Strange things happen here sometimes. I felt my stomach tighten. What kind of strange things? Mrs. Carver paused, studying me for a moment as if weighing how much to say. She lowered her voice, leaning forward slightly. Well, the last tenant, she ran out of here screaming in the middle of the night. Said something about curses and whispers. I don't know the details, but she never came back. And before her, there was a man who lived here. He was a little eccentric, always talking about the house like it was alive. He left after a while, too. People around here say he was obsessed with things beyond this world. Occult stuff. Maybe he opened a door to something he shouldn't have. I blinked, unsure she was joking, but her face was serious. Occult stuff? You mean like rituals? She nodded, her expression somber. He had a collection of old books, diaries, and strange artifacts. Some people say he tried to summon things. Some people say he succeeded. I don't know, but there's something off about this place. Always has been. I wasn't sure if I believed her, but her words stuck with me. I wasn't exactly a skeptic when it came to strange happenings, but I'd never been one to let fear rule me. I nodded politely and excused myself, but the weight of her words lingered in my mind as I walked back to the house. That night, as I lay in bed, I tried to brush off Mrs. Carver's warning. It was just an old house with an unsettling history. Of course, there were bound to be strange stories, but there was something in her tone, something in the way she spoke about the place that made me uneasy. I tried to distract myself by reading a book, but my eyes kept drifting to the shadows in the corner of my room. The air felt heavier tonight, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Then I heard it, a soft, unmistakable creak. I froze, listening intently. The sound came from the hallway, a slow, deliberate squeak of the floorboards. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, closer. Someone, or something, was walking through the hallway outside my room. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't sure what to think. I had lived in old houses before. Creaking floors were normal, but the timing of it, the way it seemed to be coming toward my door, didn't sit right with me. I held my breath, hoping to hear the sound again. Maybe it was the house settling. Maybe it was nothing. But then I heard it again, a soft thud. It was closer this time, much closer. I shot up in bed, staring at the door, my pulse pounding in my ears. It felt like I wasn't alone anymore. The temperature in the room seemed to drop, and my breath came out in visible puffs. I glanced at the clock. It was well past midnight. I didn't know what to do. My feet felt like lead, and I couldn't bring myself to move. The sound continued, this time with a slight dragging noise like something or someone was stumbling down the hall. I waited and waited, but nothing happened. No more sounds. No more footsteps. Just the silence. I convinced myself that it was just my nerves, that the house, as old as it was, made noises in the night. But deep down I knew something was wrong. Something wasn't right. The next day, the house felt different. It was still the same, creaky floorboards, drafty rooms, and the musty smell of age, but there was a strange weight to the air now, as though something had changed. I kept hearing noises in the night, always when I was on the verge of sleep. Soft whispers, too quiet to make out, would linger in the dark, just beyond my reach. I started researching the house's history. It was an old Victorian, one of the first built in the neighborhood, but there were gaps in the records, things that didn't add up. No one seemed to know much about the original owner, just a vague mention of a man named Arthur Blackwell, who had lived there alone for years, before disappearing mysteriously. The only thing I could find was a name scribbled on an old map. Something about a hidden room in the basement, a place sealed off from the rest of the house. My curiosity piqued. I knew there was something here that I wasn't seeing, something that Mrs. Carver hadn't told me, and I had a feeling it was waiting for me to find it. That night, I decided to go down into the basement. I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was alive. Not in the literal sense, of course, but in the way it seemed to watch me, as if it had a memory of its own. Mrs. Carver's words echoed in my mind as I made my way to the basement door. Some houses hold on to memories, and some of them aren't so nice. The thought made my stomach tighten, But my curiosity got the better of me. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, the air thick with dust and the unmistakable smell of old, damp earth. The basement was dimly lit by a single light bulb, flickering occasionally, as if struggling to keep the darkness at bay. I hesitated for a moment, the house creaking softly around me, as if it were trying to warn me. But I couldn't stop now. I needed to understand what had happened here. The door to the basement creaked open with an unsettling groan, revealing a narrow, winding staircase that led down into the heart of the house. I descended slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last, the air growing colder as I went deeper. When I reached the bottom, I paused to take in the sight of the room. It was cluttered with old furniture, discarded boxes, and stacks of forgotten belongings. Everything seemed abandoned, untouched for years. But it wasn't the dusty piles of junk that caught my attention. It was a far corner of the basement, where the walls seemed to warp, the plaster cracked and peeling away. The shadows that were darker than the rest of the room, as if the darkness itself had pooled in that one spot. I approached cautiously, my footsteps echoing off the walls. The temperature dropped further as I drew closer. The floorboards creaked beneath me, and a faint chill danced across the back of my neck. I reached out to touch the wall in that shadowy corner, feeling the rough surface of the cracked plaster. As my fingers brushed against it, a sudden coldness gripped my skin, sending a shiver up my spine. Without thinking, I pushed against the wall. To my surprise, it moved. Slowly, with a groan, the wall shifted inward, revealing a narrow passage behind it. I couldn't believe it. It was a hidden room. My heart pounded as I stepped forward. The door now fully opened, revealing a small, cramped space. It was filled with old books, dusty and worn, some of them stacked in precarious piles. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and something more foul, something I couldn't quite place, but it made the back of my throat tighten. I stepped inside, my feet crunching on the debris scattered across the floor. My eyes scanned the room, landing on a large, ancient-looking book that sat atop a small wooden pedestal. The book was bound in dark leather, its pages yellowed and fragile. The cover was adorned with strange symbols that I didn't recognize, but they seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, almost as if they were alive. I reached out, hesitated, and then gently opened the book. The pages fluttered, as if eager to reveal their secrets. The first few pages were filled with strange, arcane writing in a language I couldn't understand. But the further I flipped, the more the content began to shift, becoming a detailed account of rituals that had taken place in this very house. The name Arthur Blackwell appeared frequently, along with references to the dark door and the things beyond. My heart raced as I read the chilling accounts of strange ceremonies, symbols drawn in blood, and whispers that echoed through the house at night. Blackwell had been obsessed with the occult, convinced that there were doors, gates, that could be open to other realms, and he had believed that the house itself was a conduit to something far worse. The further I read, the more disturbed I became. Blackwell had written of an ancient curse that had followed him into the house, a curse tied to the very foundation of the building. He had been trying to open a door, a portal, and he had succeeded. The book detailed the rituals he performed to contact entities beyond this world, things that shouldn't be contacted. And in the end, Blackwell wrote about hearing voices that would come from the shadows, begging him come closer to open the door. As I read, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I felt the air grow colder and a strange pressure build up in the room. I turned the page to find more details, but the words blurred as I looked at them, as if the very ink was shifting before my eyes. Then, the last entry caught my attention. It was a warning. Do not open the door. Do not speak the words. The shadows will come for you, and you will never be able to leave. I slammed the book shut, my hands trembling. My mind raced with questions. What had Blackwell done? What had he unleashed? Was it still here in this house? Suddenly, the faint sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. Slow, deliberate, just like the sounds I'd heard in the night. I froze. My pulse quickened as the footsteps grew louder, moving toward the basement. The house felt alive again. The air was thick with something ancient and dark. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave this place, to escape whatever was lurking here. But something held me there. My feet felt glued to the floor, my body paralyzed by the sense of dread that pressed against me. The footsteps stopped right behind me. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. Nothing. The basement was empty. But the air was thick with a presence. I could feel it now, brushing against my skin, its cold fingers reaching out from the shadows. I had to get out. I rushed up the stairs, barely able to keep my footing as I scrambled to the door. I closed it behind me with a loud bang, and the silence that followed was deafening. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood in the hallway, trembling. I didn't know what I had just uncovered, but I was certain of one thing. Whatever had been awakened in this house was still here, and it was waiting for me. I couldn't sleep. The events of the basement played over and over in my mind, each time feeling more surreal. The footsteps, the whispers, the overwhelming sense that something ancient and powerful was watching me. I thought about the book, the rituals, the warning. What had Blackwell done? Was he the one still haunting this house? And what did it mean to open a door to something beyond? I tried to push the thoughts out of my mind as I lay in bed, the thick darkness of the room pressing in around me. The only sound was the occasional creak of the old house settling, but tonight it felt different, more alive, as if the house was holding its breath. My phone buzzed beside me on the nightstand. I reached for it, my fingers still trembling from my earlier panic. It was a text from Mrs. Carver. "Are you okay? I heard some noises last night. Sounds like footsteps." My stomach dropped. I hadn't told anyone about the footsteps. I quickly typed a reply, forcing myself to sound calm, despite the unease tightening my chest. "Yeah, just the house settling. It's pretty old, so I guess it makes weird noises." A few moments passed before her response came. "Just be careful, dear. Houses like these have a way of showing their true nature when you least expect it." The message made my skin crawl. I hadn't told her anything about the strange occurrences. How did she know? I tossed my phone back on the nightstand and tried to focus on calming my breathing. I needed to sleep. I had to. I couldn't keep running from what was happening here. But sleep wouldn't come. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch and shift, flickering with something I couldn't explain. I closed my eyes, trying to ignore the sensations prickling my skin, but the weight of the darkness pressed down on me. And then I heard it again, the faint sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate steps. They echoed from the hallway, slow but unmistakable. My heart jumped in my chest. No, it couldn't be. I tried to tell myself it was just the house. That old houses made noises. But this was different. The steps didn't belong. I got out of bed and cautiously crept to the door, my heart hammering in my ears. The hallway outside was shrouded in darkness, only the faint glow of the moonlight filtering through the curtains. I stood frozen at the threshold, listening. The footsteps stopped. The silence was suffocating. I stepped into the hallway, my feet barely making a sound on the creaky floorboards. Every step felt like a betrayal of my own fear, but I had to know. I had to see what was happening. I turned the corner, where the stairs to the second floor were just visible in the distance. And there at the top of the stairs was a shadow. It stood still, unmoving, as if waiting. The darkness seemed to cling to it, thick and oppressive. I couldn't see its shape clearly, but I could feel it watching me. I swallowed hard, my breath shallow. My body screamed at me to turn around, to flee, but my feet were rooted to the floor. The air grew colder, the temperature dropping so suddenly that I could see my breath. The shadow shifted, moving just slightly, as though acknowledging my presence. I wanted to scream, but the words caught in my throat. I couldn't make a sound. I stood there paralyzed, as the shadow seemed to stretch toward me, growing taller, wider, and then, just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, leaving nothing but the chill in the air and the sound of my own ragged breathing. I stumbled back, my legs shaky, and hurried back to my room, slamming the door behind me. The coldness lingered, a suffocating presence pressing against my chest. My hands were trembling as I reached for the light switch, flooding the room with bright, harsh light. I stood in the middle of the room, my pulse still racing, as I tried to calm myself down. It had to be a trick of the light. It had to be. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The shadow was real. And it wasn't just a shadow. It was something else. Something that didn't belong. The house was full of secrets. I realized. It wasn't just a past that lingered here. It was whatever Blackwell had awakened. Whatever had come through that door, he had opened. The door that was still open. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw it, the shadow, watching me. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting, just beyond the edge of my vision, waiting for me to slip up, waiting for me to let my guard down. The next morning, I could barely function. I tried to go about my day, making coffee, unpacking the last of boxes, but I couldn't concentrate. My mind kept drifting back to the shadow, to the footsteps, and to the book in the basement. I needed answers. I couldn't keep living like this, on edge, afraid to close my eyes, afraid to trust my own senses. I made a decision. That afternoon, I went back to the basement. The shadows were thicker this time, the air even colder than before. I had to know what I was dealing with. The book, the rituals, the curse. I needed to understand what Blackwell had done and how it had affected this house. But as I stood in front of the hidden room again, I felt something different, a sense of dread. The house seemed to hold its breath, the silence pressing against me, and I wondered if I was about to uncover something far worse than I had bargained for. The door to the secret room creaked open, and as I stepped inside, I noticed something strange. The book was no longer on the pedestal. It was gone. I froze. Someone had been here. And now, I was alone in the dark with whatever had taken it. The room was eerily still, the only sound my shallow breathing. I stood frozen, staring at the empty pedestal where the book had once been. It was gone, vanished without a trace. The air felt thicker now, as if the house itself was holding something back, as if it was trying to keep me from knowing the truth. I scanned the room, my eyes darting over every corner, looking for any clue, any sign of what had happened to the book. I ran my fingers along the stone walls, cold and smooth, searching for hidden compartments or secret passages. But I found nothing. The room had an unsettling emptiness, as if something had been here just moments ago and was now gone. I stepped closer to the pedestal, feeling the chill in the air intensify. My eyes dropped to the floor, and I froze again. There, lying just beyond the pedestal, was a single scrap of paper. It was yellowed and worn, as if it had been there for ages. I picked it up with trembling hands, unfolding it carefully. The words were written in an elegant looping script, though they were faded and hard to read. I squinted, trying to make sense of the text. Come, and the door will open. Blood binds a path. The soul will wander. A shiver ran down my spine as I read the words over and over. What did they mean? Who had written this? The message seemed like a warning, but it was cryptic, its meaning hidden beneath layers of uncertainty. I looked around again, as if expecting someone to jump out from the shadows. My heart raced, and the fear that had been lurking just beneath the surface now surged up, consuming me. I couldn't stay here any longer. I needed to leave, but a part of me, something deep inside, urged me to stay and search for more. The house seemed to pull at me, its presence overwhelming and suffocating. I had to know what was happening. I had to understand what Blackwell had done and how it was tied to the house. But what if I wasn't meant to know? What if the answers were too dangerous? The thought made my chest tighten, but I pushed it aside. I couldn't let fear control me. Not now. I stuffed the paper into my pocket and hurried out of the basement, my footsteps echoing through the silent house. The shadows seemed to close in around me as I ascended the stairs. The chill in the air followed me like a shadow of its own. I tried to shake the feeling of being watched, but it clung to me, relentless. I couldn't escape the house. It was alive with something dark, something that had been waiting for years, maybe even centuries, and now it had its grip on me. I made my way to the library, hoping to find more answers in Blackwell's journals. The old man had been obsessed with the occult, and if I could get my hands on his writings, maybe I could understand what I was up against. The library was just as dusty and neglected as I remembered, the shelves stacked high with books I had yet to even begin exploring. But today, I wasn't looking for just any book. I was looking for Blackwell's journals, his notes, anything that could give me a glimpse into his twisted mind. I pulled a few books on the shelf and leafed through them, searching for anything that stood out. Most were about ancient rituals, symbols, and strange texts, but nothing seemed to speak directly to what I was experiencing. Then, at the very back of the shelf, I found it, a small leather-bound book, worn with age. It wasn't like the others. It was hidden, almost as if it didn't belong here. I pulled it out carefully, and as I did, I felt a cold gust of wind sweep through the room, as if the house itself was reacting to the discovery. I opened the book to the first page, and the handwriting was unmistakable, Blackwell's. The text was erratic, the words scrawled hastily, as though he was in a constant state of panic. The pages were filled with details about his experiments, his rituals, and his obsession with the supernatural. As I read, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. This was no ordinary man. Blackwell had delved into forces that were beyond human understanding, and now those forces were awake. One entry caught my eye, dated several years before Blackwell's death. Tonight, I opened the door. The ritual was complete, but something went wrong. The shadows in the house are restless, and I can feel them closing in on me. They whisper my name. They hunger for something I cannot name. My blood ran cold. This was it. This was what had happened. Blackwell had opened a door to something beyond this world. And now it was free, moving through the house, claiming it for itself. The next page was a list of symbols and strange markings. Blackwell had drawn them with precision, but they seemed nonsensical to me. As I studied them, I felt a creeping sensation at the back of my neck, as though someone was behind me, watching. I turned the page, and my heart skipped a beat. The next entry was a drawing, crude but clear. It was the same shadow I had seen last night, standing at the top of the stairs. Blackwell had seen it too. It was real, and it wasn't just a shadow. It was something else, something far worse. I slammed the book shut, the sudden noise echoing in the empty room. I couldn't take it anymore. The pieces were falling into place, and they weren't pretty. The house, the rituals, the shadow, it was all connected, and now I was in the middle of it. There was no escape. I stood up, my knees weak, my heart racing in my chest. The house was alive, and it wasn't going to let me leave. As I turned to leave the library, I heard a sound, a soft, almost imperceptible creak, like someone or something was standing just behind me. I didn't dare turn around. I bolted out of the library, my breath ragged in my chest. The house was closing in on me, its walls pressing in like the grip of a vice. I couldn't explain what I had just discovered, but it was clear now. Something dark had been awakened in this house, something I was never meant to understand. I ran through the dimly lit hallways, the faint creak of the floorboards beneath my feet echoing in the silence. Every shadow seemed to twist. Every corner felt like it was hiding something just out of view. The air around me felt colder now, a biting chill that seeped into my skin, leaving me shivering uncontrollably. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of this place. But every time I tried to push myself toward the door, my feet felt like they were made of stone, as if the house itself was keeping me trapped inside. My body was exhausted, my mind spinning from everything I had uncovered. But I couldn't stop moving, couldn't stop running. I reached the front door and yanked on the handle, but it didn't budge. Panic surged through me. I pulled again, harder this time, but the door remained shut, as if some unseen force was holding it in place. "Let me out!" I shouted, my voice cracking. My own words fell hollow in the emptiness, as though they were swallowed up by the very walls around me. I backed away from the door, looking around in desperation. There had to be another way out. A window, perhaps, or a back door. Anything. My eyes darted around, but all I could see were the thick shadows clinging to every corner of the room. I was trapped, and then I heard it, a faint whisper, so quiet at first that I wasn't sure if I was imagining it. But then it came again, clearer this time, right behind me, as if the walls themselves were speaking. "Leave." The word was barely audible, a breath against my ear. My heart skipped a beat, and I spun around, but no one was there. The room was empty, silent. I stood frozen, my mind racing. I was sure I had heard something, but the house was still, too still. I turned my head, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows, but nothing moved. I took a shaky breath and pushed the thought aside. It was just the stress, the anxiety getting to me. The house was old, creaky, and full of sounds I didn't understand. There was no need to jump to conclusions. But even as I tried to rationalize it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something was in the walls. Something that was watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. I forced myself to move, making my way down the hallway toward the stairs. I needed to get to my room. I needed to calm down, get some sleep, and think things through. But as I walked, the whispering grew louder. Leave. Leave now. The words were clearer, more insistent. They seemed to come from every direction, from within the walls themselves. I could feel them pressing in on me, each word like a cold hand tightening around my throat. I stopped in my tracks, my breath coming faster. My heart pounded in my chest as the whispers swirled around me. I looked toward the walls, the wood panels that stretched up to the ceiling, but all I could see were shadows, deep and impenetrable. And then, in the silence that followed, I heard it, a soft scrape, like fingernails on wood. Slow, deliberate. It came from within the wall. I backed away, my pulse racing, my body trembling. It was real. Whatever was in this house, whatever Blackwell had unleashed, it was here with me. And it wasn't just in the shadows anymore. The sound came again, closer this time. It was unmistakable. Something was moving behind the walls, scratching, clawing, trying to get out. I turned and ran, my footsteps pounding on the creaking floor as I ascended the stairs. I didn't care where I was going now. I just needed to get away from that sound, away from whatever was lurking behind the walls. I reached the second floor and dashed to my room, slamming the door shut behind me. I leaned against it, my chest heaving, my heart still racing. I wanted to lock the door, but I knew it wouldn't help. Whatever this was, it wasn't something a locked door could keep out. The whispers hadn't stopped. They were still there, floating through the air, soft and insistent, like a lullaby twisted into a nightmare. Leave, leave now, backslash. I collapsed onto the bed, my head spinning. I could hear the scratching sound again, but this time it wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from the floor, from beneath the bed. I held my breath, afraid to move. The room felt colder, the air thick with an unspoken presence. I could feel it, a weight in the room that wasn't there before. Slowly, I turned my head toward the edge of bed, my heart in my throat. The shadows beneath the bed were deeper than they should have been, swirling like smoke. I stared, frozen, unable to move, unable to look away. And then a hand, pale, skeletal, slipped from beneath the bed, fingers reaching toward me, the skin stretched tight over bones. The hand was followed by an arm, long and thin, crawling toward me. I screamed and scrambled backward, my mind screaming for me to run, to get away from whatever was coming. But before I could move, the hand lunged and the room went black. I woke up gasping, my body drenched in sweat, heart pounding in my chest. The room was still dark, the only sound the heavy beat of my pulse in my ears. My breath came in sharp gasps, as though I had just run a marathon. I blinked, disoriented, trying to make sense of where I was. The bed felt cold, too cold, and my mind couldn't piece together what had just happened. The hand, the arm reaching from beneath the bed. It wasn't real, right? It couldn't be. It was just a nightmare, a product of my fear, of everything I had learned about this house. But something inside me wasn't convinced. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, trying to shake the fog from my mind. The room was silent now. No whispers, no scratching. Just the low hum of the house settling around me. I glanced toward the edge of the bed, half expecting to see the pale hand still waiting for me. But the floor was empty. The shadows beneath the bed seemed ordinary again, just the usual deep blackness. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that something, someone was still there, watching, waiting. I climbed out of bed, my legs shaky, but I forced myself to move. I needed to get to the bottom of this. I had to. I couldn't live in constant fear of whatever this house had become. I had to know what I was dealing with. I pulled open the drawer on the nightstand and retrieved the notebook I'd found earlier, the one that seemed to have been left behind by the house's previous occupants. The pages had been filled with frantic scrawls, warnings, and ramblings. I had barely skimmed it before, but now I had to read it all. I needed answers. I sat at the small desk in the corner of the room, flipping open the book to the first page. The handwriting was hurried, jagged, but legible enough. Asterisk, the house is alive. It breathes. It watches. You must leave before it's too late. Asterisk. I shivered, closing my eyes for a moment, trying to push down the creeping sense of dread that had settled in my chest. I turned the page. Asterisk, he came back. Every night. The footsteps. Always heavy. Always near. I hear him now. The man who lived here before. He died here, they say. But it wasn't just his body that stayed. Asterisk. I read on, the words sending chills down my spine. There were more accounts, more stories of strange happenings, of noises and shadows that no one could explain. But as I flipped through the pages, one entry stood out, dated just a few days before the previous occupant had vanished. Asterisk, it was him, the one who brought it here. He was obsessed with the occult, did rituals in the basement. I heard him mumbling, chanting late at night. I tried to leave, but the door wouldn't open. It never opens anymore. I don't know what he did, but I know I can't escape. Asterisk. My fingers trembled as I turned the page. This wasn't just some random tale of a haunted house. This was something much darker, something deliberate. Someone had brought this evil into this place, had opened a door that shouldn't have been opened. The back of my neck prickled. I set the notebook down, my mind racing. There had to be a way out of this, a way to break whatever hold this place had on me. I couldn't just keep running, couldn't keep pretending it wasn't real. But before I could think any further, I heard it again, a soft creak, like a floorboard shifting under the weight of a heavy step. I froze, my breath hitching in my throat. The sound was faint but unmistakable. It was coming from a hallway outside my room, slow and deliberate, like someone was walking toward me. I stood up, my heart hammering in my chest. I had to get out of this room. I couldn't stay here, not with the knowledge I had now, not with the house seemingly alive and aware of my every move. I moved toward the door, but before I could reach the handle, the creaking stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then a whisper, "Come." The voice was low, almost a breath, but it was enough to send a wave of ice through my veins. I spun around, looking desperately for any sign of movement, any trace of life in the shadows. But the room was empty. I pushed the door open and stepped into the hallway. Every muscle in my body tensed. I crept forward, my ears straining to catch any sound, any sign of what was out there. The house was deathly quiet, as though it was holding its breath, waiting for me to make a mistake. I reached the stairs, my hand on the railing, but I hesitated. A chill ran up my spine, and I turned to look at the hallway behind me. The shadows were thick now, darker than before. They seemed to move, shifting in and out of shape like something alive. I swallowed hard, but my feet wouldn't budge. And then I saw it. At the far end of the hallway, standing just out of reach of the dim light, was a figure, a tall, thin shape that didn't belong. My pulse thundered in my ears, my mind screaming at me to run. But I couldn't move, couldn't tear my eyes away. The figure was standing completely still, its face hidden in shadow. I couldn't make out any features, but I could feel it staring at me. A cold, gnawing sensation settled deep in my gut. I was being watched. The figure took a step forward, its movements slow and deliberate, as though it was savoring the moment. And then I heard the whisper again, "Leave now." I didn't wait for it to come closer. I turned and bolted down the stairs, my breath ragged, heart pounding in my chest. I had to get out of this house. I had to escape before whatever was here reached me. But as I reached the front door, I realized something. It was already too late. The door, my only way out, was closed, and it was locked. My hands shook as I gripped the cold, brass handle of the front door. I pulled, yanked, twisted, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me. flooding my chest and making my breath come in short, desperate gasps. I could hear it. Astra's footsteps star. Heavy, deliberate steps echoing from somewhere deep inside the house. And they were getting closer. I stepped back, pressing my back against the door, my mind racing. Why couldn't I open it? I had just come in through this very door a few days ago. It had worked fine then. But now, it was as if something was keeping me inside, trapping me here. Was it locked? I tried the handle again, more forcefully this time. But it didn't even rattle. My heart skipped a beat. No matter how much I pulled, the door wouldn't move. I turned toward the hallway, my eyes darting nervously in direction of the stairs. The figure, the one I'd seen in the hallway, was still there. I could feel its presence, even if I couldn't see it directly. The weight of its gaze seemed to follow me, always just out of view, but never truly gone. I looked back at the door, but my mind was clouded. Asterisk, how could I be locked in? How had it happened so quickly? Asterisk, the house was playing tricks on me. I knew it. It had to be. Maybe I had simply imagined it. Maybe I wasn't locked in. Maybe the door had just jammed. I moved to the nearest window and tried to open it, but it too refused to budge. A sharp, metallic screech echoed through the room as I pressed my fingers against the pane. The window stuck like a relic of the past. I slammed my fist against the glass. "Open!" I shouted, my voice breaking in the stillness of the room. But the window didn't respond. Nothing did. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my ears. I felt a wave of dizziness and had to steady myself against the wall. The suffocating pressure of the house was closing in on me, its walls pressing in like an unrelenting vice. I needed to get out, but no matter where I turned, the exit remained elusive. I swallowed hard, fighting back the surge of fear threatening to consume me. My mind reeled. Asterisk, I can't stay here. I can't just let it trap me. Asterisk. Then out of the corner of my eye, I saw it again, the faintest movement. Something shifted in the darkness. In the shadowed corner of the room where the hallway met the living room, it was subtle, a barely perceptible flicker, but enough to freeze me in place. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. And then I heard it, a low, guttural growl, not from outside the room, but from inside the house. The air grew colder, a biting chill that cut straight through me. I could feel it, the unnatural cold creeping over my skin. My breath puffed out invisible clouds in front of me, and the darkness in the room seemed to deepen, like something was drawing the very light out of the space. I reached for the light switch, my hand trembling, but as my fingers brushed the edge of the wall, a cold, clammy hand, ice cold, gripped my wrist. I gasped, spinning around, but no one was there, just the heavy darkness and the oppressive silence. My skin crawled with a feeling of being watched. I pulled my wrist away, heart hammering in my chest. I wasn't alone. I never had been. The footsteps, the growl, the cold hand, they weren't a figment of my imagination. They were real. This house, asterisk this place asterisk, was alive, just like the notebook had said, and it was trying to keep me here. I rushed back to the door, desperate to escape, but it was no use. I pressed my shoulder against it, using all my strength to shove, but the door didn't move. It didn't even creak. It was as if the house itself was holding it shut. The whisper returned, soft but unmistakable. Asterisk, you can't leave. Asterisk. The voice was no longer faint. It was clearer now, echoing in my ears, low and menacing. The air in the room grew thick, suffocating, as though the walls were closing in on me, intent on swallowing me whole. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My mind spun, and all I could hear was that voice, taunting me, laughing in the silence. Asterisk, you'll never leave this place. Asterisk. I staggered back, gasping for air, my fingers reaching for the nearest object to steady myself. My hand found the side of the old wooden bookshelf, and I clutched it like a lifeline. The house was toying with me, playing with my mind, and it was winning. In a desperate attempt to regain control, I turned and ran down the hallway. Maybe there was another exit. Maybe there was a way out of this nightmare. But as I ran, I felt the air grow heavier, colder, as though the house itself was chasing me, closing in on me from all sides. I reached the staircase and bolted up to the second floor, my feet pounding on the old wood. I glanced back only once, just to check, but the hallway behind me was still and silent. No footsteps, no whispers, but the silence didn't last. A loud, deafening slam echoed through the house, and I froze. The sound had come from below, asterisk from the front door star. I was trapped. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, staring down at the empty hallway. The slam of the door still rang in my ears, echoing through the silence of the house. I didn't know if I was hearing things or if something, someone was trying to get inside. I swallowed hard, taking slow, cautious steps forward. The house felt different now, heavier somehow, as if the air itself was thick with anticipation. The oppressive silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of my breathing. I needed to find a way out, but the question kept gnawing at me. Was there really a way out? I had to face the truth. This house wasn't just old and creaky. It was alive. It had a presence, something that clung to the walls, to the floors, to everything. It wanted me here, trapped inside its grasp. I turned down the hallway, my footsteps too loud in the eerie quiet. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just out of sight. My gaze darted each corner, every shadow, but there was nothing, no one. Yet, the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. There had to be something, a way to understand what was happening, a clue. I stepped into the small, dimly lit room at the end of the hallway, the one I had avoided since moving in. The air inside was cold, like the room itself was breathing. The floorboards creaked under my weight, and I quickly shut the door behind me, try and block out the world outside. I wasn't sure why I hadn't looked here before. Maybe it was because of the heavy, oppressive feeling the room gave off. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and the furniture was covered in dust. A single window lent a sliver of light, casting shadows that danced across the walls. But there on the far side of the room, I saw it, a small wooden desk. My breath caught in my throat. I approached it slowly, my footsteps heavy in the silence. There was something about the desk that felt important, like it held the key to everything that had been happening. I ran my fingers along the surface, brushing away the dust. The desk was old, even older than the house itself, with intricate carvings on the sides. It had a small drawer, and as I pulled it open, it would groan in protest. Inside, I found a leather-bound journal. I hesitated for a moment, then pulled the journal out. The cover was worn, the edges frayed from years of neglect. I opened it cautiously, flipping through the yellow pages. At first, the writing was sparse, just notes, nothing out of the ordinary. But then one page caught my eye. The handwriting was shaky, frantic, almost desperate. The entry read, asterisk, I can feel it, watching me. It's not just the house. It's the air, the walls. It's like it's alive, breathing, growing stronger. I've seen things, shadows that move on their own, whispers in the dark. I don't know how much longer I can stay here. I need to leave, but every time I try, it stops me. It won't let me go. I've done things, bad things, trying to understand it. I've made it worse. I can feel its eyes on me. They want me to stay. I can hear their voices now, the ones who came before me. I hear their footsteps, their whispers. I can't leave, asterisk. I shuddered, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. The journal was filled with entries like this, pages upon pages of rambling, incoherent thoughts. But one thing was clear. The previous owner of the house had gone mad, and whatever had driven them to madness, whatever had caused them to write these words, was still here. I skimmed further down the page, but the writing grew more erratic. In one passage, the handwriting became almost illegible, a scrawl of frantic words. Asterisk the rituals. The door, it has to be sealed. If it isn't sealed, it will come. It will take us all. I can hear it. The door is opening again. I can feel it. Please, God, someone help me. Asterisk, a cold chill ran down my spine. The door that had been mentioned over and over again. What door? I flipped through the journal with trembling hands, desperate for more answers. I found a page filled with strange symbols, arcane, twisted shapes that seemed to blur and shift as I looked at them. I had no idea what they meant, but the sight of them made my skin crawl. The entry beneath the symbols was dated several months before the writer's last. It said, "Asterisk, I've made a mistake. The door cannot be opened. It has been opened, and now it cannot be closed. We are all doomed. The curse is real. I've seen the shadows. Feel them. They follow me now. It will never stop until it gets what it wants. Please, I beg you, leave this place before it's too late. Asterisk." I slammed the journal shut, my breath ragged, heart racing. The words were burned into my mind. The curse, the door, the shadows. And then, as I stood there, the temperature in the room dropped. A heavy silence filled the space, and the faintest sound echoed through the walls. Footsteps. I froze, unable to move. My pulse thundered in my ears. The footsteps were unmistakable now, right behind me, too close. I turned slowly, and the room seemed to darken around me. I wasn't alone. I could feel it. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they were right behind me. My heart slammed against my chest as I turned around. There was nothing there, just the empty room, with its peeling wallpaper and dusty furniture. The silence was deafening again, but the air felt heavier, thick with something I couldn't name. I blinked rapidly, my hands trembling. I had to be imagining things. This was all in my head. I hadn't seen anything, heard nothing but the echo of my own thoughts. Still, the weight of that presence lingered in the room, hanging in the air like a dark cloud. I backed away from the desk, the journal still clutched tightly in my hand. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch, bending unnaturally, as though they were watching me. I tried to shake off the sensation, but it was impossible. It was like the room itself was closing in on me, the walls leaning inward, the floorboards groaning under my feet. Suddenly, there was a loud thud, the sound of something heavy falling to the floor. My breath caught in my throat. I turned toward the noise, but there was nothing, just the same empty room. I was losing my mind. I had to get out. I had to leave this place before whatever was here consumed me, too. But the thought of leaving, of walking out into the world, knowing what I just uncovered, was terrifying. What was I really running from? A house? A curse? Or was it something worse? Something that had followed me here, waiting for the right moment to strike? The journal. I needed to know more. I couldn't leave until I understood the truth. I stepped forward, cautiously, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of movement. The shadows seemed to shift again, the shapes in the corner warping and twisting into something more solid. I blinked, and the shapes were gone. But I could still feel them, like something was lurking just out of sight. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was behind me, something that hadn't been there before. I whipped around, but there was nothing. I was losing it. I was definitely losing it. With shaking hands, I opened the journal again, desperate for some kind of answer. I needed something to cling to, something that made sense. The page I had turned in now was a scrawl, barely legible. It looked like the handwriting had become more hurried, more frantic. Asterisk, they're here. Asterisk. My breath caught in my throat. I read the words again, my mind racing. The writer had been talking about them. The shadows. Asterisk, I can hear them breathing in the walls. They're always watching, always waiting. They want me. They want us. They won't stop until they get what they need. The door is open and they're coming through. They're coming for me now, /asterisk. I had to stop reading. My head was spinning. The words blurring together. The journal was becoming more incoherent by the second, and yet I couldn't stop. I needed to understand. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, desperate for something that made sense. Then on the very last page, I found something that made my blood run cold. A drawing, a sketch of a door. But it wasn't just any door. The image was twisted, distorted, as if the door itself was alive, breathing. The outline of it seemed to pulse on the page, the colors dark and swirling. Around the door were strange symbols, like the ones I had seen earlier, only now they looked even more alive. moving, shifting, as though they were written in ink that wasn't quite dry. And the most chilling thing of all, there was something on the other side of that door, something looking back at me. It was watching me. I snapped the journal shut, my heart racing. The room felt like it was suffocating me, the walls closing in, the shadows thickening. The temperature had dropped even further, and I could feel it on my skin, a biting cold that made my teeth ache. A cold breath on my neck made me freeze. I slowly turned my head, dread clawing at my throat. I wasn't alone. The figure was standing in the corner of the room, half hidden in shadow. It was tall, too tall, unnaturally so. Its form was hazy like smoke, but the outline was distinct. The darkness around it seemed to pulse, alive. I could hear it breathing, shallow and ragged. It was close, too close. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My body refused to move, rooted in place by an overwhelming sense of terror. The figure stepped forward, and I felt a chill run through me, like ice in my veins. It was coming closer. I felt its presence, pressing in on me, like it was suffocating me. My legs finally obeyed, and I stumbled backward, my mind screaming for me to run. But the door was blocked. There was no escape. The figure reached out with a long, bony hand, and I could see its face now, pale, twisted, its eyes wide and black, empty voids that seemed to draw everything into them. I backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The walls were too close, the shadows too deep. I could hear it whispering now, a voice that didn't come from its lips, but from all around me. Asterisk, stay with us. Asterisk. I turned and ran, stumbling through the door and into the hallway. The cold followed me, and the whispers grew louder, chasing me through the darkened house. But no matter how fast I ran, the footsteps were always behind me, growing closer, until a heavy hand slammed onto my shoulder, spinning me around. I was face to face with the darkness. The grip on my shoulder was ice cold, sending a shock of fear straight through me. I didn't dare to look up. I couldn't, because I knew what I would see. The whispers were louder now, almost deafening, like the house itself was alive and calling to me. Asterisk, you can't escape. Asterisk, the voice rasped, so close I could feel the air shift with every word. It wasn't a voice that belonged to any living person. It was deeper, more ancient, like a groan from the earth itself. I tried to tear myself away from its grasp, but the hand on my shoulder tightened, pulling me back. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the air growing thick with the overwhelming presence of whatever was behind me. Without thinking, I spun around, my body acting on instinct. There was nothing there. The hallway was empty. I blinked, my breath coming in short gasps. The icy chill was gone. The whispers had stopped. It was quiet again, too quiet. I looked around, my eyes frantically scanning every shadow. The house was old, creaky floorboards, walls that seemed to moan with every breeze. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there, something lurking just beyond my sight. Something I couldn't see but could feel, like a dark cloud hanging over me, pressing down on my chest. I wanted to scream, to run, to break free of this nightmare, but my legs wouldn't move. They felt like lead, weighed down by an invisible force. The house seemed to be closing in on me, the walls narrowing, the ceilings lowering. I could feel it, all of it, like it was watching me. That's when I heard it, a sound coming from deep within the house, a scraping, shuffling noise, a sound that seemed to move from one side of the house to the other, as if something was crawling inside the walls. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was too deliberate, too intentional. I stepped backward, inching toward the stairs. I had to leave. I had to get out. This wasn't normal. No matter how much I tried to convince myself that it was just an old house settling. Something deep inside me knew it was more than that. The air felt wrong, charged, as though something was waiting, watching, just beyond my reach. I heard the scraping again, closer now, a slow, deliberate drag, like claws on the floor. My breath hitched, and I spun around to face the staircase, my body urging me to run, but the house had other plans. The moment I turned my back, I heard it, the sound of footsteps behind me, slow and heavy, A chill ran down my spine, and my heart dropped into my stomach. It wasn't my imagination. The house was alive. There was something here with me. Something ancient. Something hungry. I tried to shout, but the words caught in my throat. I was frozen, unable to do anything but listen to the sound growing louder and closer. The footsteps weren't following me. They were circling me. I could hear them coming from all directions, from above and below, from the very walls themselves. I was trapped. I felt something brush against my shoulder, and I whirled around, heart racing in panic. But there was no one there. The silence hit me like a physical blow, heavy and suffocating. I could taste the fear in the back of my throat. I stumbled back toward the stairs, desperate to escape, but my legs were shaking too violently to support me. I gripped the railing, hoping to steady myself, but it was no use. I had to get out. I had to leave before whatever was in this house came for me, too. I pushed myself up the stairs, the air growing colder with each step. The walls seemed to shift, the shadows reaching for me. But I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. If I looked back, I knew it would be there. I knew it would grab me and drag me back into the darkness. The top of the stairs was a blur, the hallway stretching out before me like a dark tunnel, and I kept running, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stop. Not yet. Suddenly, I stopped. I heard it again, the scratching sound. But this time, it wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from behind the door at the end of the hallway. A faint thumping sound like something or someone was trying to get out. A cold, nauseating dread settled in my gut. I couldn't move. My body refused to obey. I was rooted in place, too terrified to approach the door, but too terrified to run. Then the door creaked. It wasn't a loud creak. It was faint, like something was testing the threshold, just barely pushing at the door. My hands clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms, and I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. I had to know what was behind that door, but I couldn't make myself move. The door creaked again, this time louder, and then there was silence. Complete and utter silence. A silence that felt like it was holding its breath. And then, asterisk bang, asterisk, the door slammed open. A rush of cold air flooded out from behind it, and I felt a chill shoot through me. It was followed by a smell, a rancid, rotten stench that made my stomach turn. The shadows behind the door seemed to shift, and I heard the scraping noise again, louder now, as though whatever was behind that door was finally free. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't carry me. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I was frozen, standing in the hallway, unable to move, unable to escape. The air grew colder, and I felt a hand brush against my neck, icy, clammy, like the touch of death itself. And then I heard it, clear as day, a voice low and rasping, coming from behind the door. Asterisk, it's too late. You're already ours. Asterisk.